Welcome to the Climate Hive show. What do you solve? We are live on Earth Day at San Francisco Climate Week. I am Kevin Drolet, aka Kedro, here with my Climate Hive co-founder and co-host Mike Higgins, aka Higo, and we're super excited today because we have our climate-based fellow and CEO of Investature, Scott Ryan, who's joining us today. So let me tell you a little bit about Scott. Scott is a go-to-market innovator, been in Fintech, and he's transitioned all his energies into solving for climate. So we're going to learn a lot about Scott today. We're going to learn a lot about what Investature is doing, and we're excited. So let's go ahead and kick off the show. And I always turn it over to my good man Higo with the first question.
All right, we'll roll it out. Scott, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for the walk up here. Appreciate
Yes.
it. You know, our show is about what you solve. So we're really on the side of the beginning, the idea, the inspiration, right? Because there was a world before Investature, and then now there's a world with it, right? And what we really want to hear is the story, right? The idea, and then the decision to take action, and then what it is, what it does.
Yeah. So it's a very innocuous question, right? Almost like saying, how are you doing today?
Right.
Right? Around someone who's running a small business, right, as a founder. And I'm going to give you two versions of the answer because today's a special day. Today's Earth Day.
Yeah.
Right? And if this was a different day, I might have a different answer for the question because I would normally talk about solving finance emissions. I would normally talk about trying to close the climate finance gap, right, through employee experience and investment choices. And today I'm going to talk about something different because it's a philosophical day, right? And it's a tumultuous time. I actually think Investature is trying to solve for happiness. Right. And let me say what that means a little bit more. Right, when happiness universally for people is health and wellness. Happiness universally for people is a sense of community. Right? Everyone in the world feels those two things. Now, then other definitions vary. Right? You know, some people believe wealth, some people are very involved in the climate, like the three of us are. But we're trying to solve for happiness. Right? And we're trying to solve for happiness while part of that happiness is for the planet and your community where you experience the planet locally. Right? And we're trying to do it in a new way. Right? But the reason I'm not going into the nuts and bolts of Investature is because everything around climate is a systems change thing. Solving for the climate, it's a resource allocation problem. People treat it as something more complicated than that. And it's really not. Right? If you put enough money, enough mind power, enough people power at any problem, it's solved. Climate is just a system change resource allocation problem. Just like fighting the Nazis was a resource allocation problem, right? Human rights movement is a resource allocation problem. Climate is no different, and for whatever reason, people treat it differently, and it shouldn't be. But I think solving for climate actually helps people solve for happiness. And so that's the philosophical answer of what do we solve for.
So how did you come to that philosophical understanding of like what you're doing? Like what was your moment where you were like, this is what this is where I'm gonna dig in and this is where I'm gonna make a difference. Like, how did that moment happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think every successful entrepreneurial business is personal first, right? Where people try to solve a problem that they inherently understand, right? And then you try to scale it so that other people can benefit from your solution. Right, and successful ones are only where you find that product market fit, right? And so for me, right, I have my lifelong journey. Environmentalism has always been my number one cause outside of the workplace, right? And I was in my local news talking about don't litter, right? Because when I was in middle school, that's what it meant to me, right? And then I'm 50 now, so when was that? That was in the early 80s, right? That's what environmentalism was like recycle and don't litter, and also don't dump oil on people, right? It was very basic things. Don't let rivers burn on fire because they're polluted. Don't have smog in Los Angeles or other cities, right? That's what environmentalism was in the 80s. And everybody continues to learn more, right? And the problem keeps on getting worse, right? And the headline of the problem on the climate side, which is a subset of environment, is actually the emissions. It's not the temperature rise. The temperature rise is the symptom, right? The headlines always talk about that. And people say, hey, the temperature is the highest ever again. The problem is that emissions are the highest ever again, right? And the emissions, as people who are versed in this know, they're cumulative, right? And so, and my, for lack of a better phrase, my Bible of knowledge on climate is Project Drawdown.
Yeah.
And they have been since the book was written 15, 20 years ago. Jonathan Foley, as the current executive director of his team, are exceptional in helping people understand the problem and that it's cumulative. Al Gore is exceptional at it, so other people are exceptional at it as well. And I'm just learning from them and then trying to say, what can I do, right? Yeah. And so I want to affect change yesterday with the most impact possible yesterday. My professional skill set is financial services and technology within financial services and consulting within financial services. That's been my whole career. Across Accenture, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, Salesforce. Always doing something innovative and then also doing something that was really related to customer experience. Driving revenue and profit through customer experience within the lens of financial services, technology, and consulting. It's like teaching. And a year and a half ago, or I say 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I was in the year 2023. It was one of the worst years of my life for two reasons. One is athleticism is a big part of my life, and I have paralysis in my left hand, and I had a spinal surgery to try to solve it, and it failed. And so, athletics is huge for me, and suddenly I had like a step function drop in my athleticism versus the gradual drop that happens with aging. And I know it's selfish, like it's not like I had something amputated, right? Like a drastic, something that's gonna stop my ability to do athletics, but for me personally, that was huge. And then what relates to my career is I had left Salesforce, which is a company I loved and I've learned a lot from, especially around the concept of business is the greatest platform for change in the world. And they live it through and through. I've always known what I want to do in my life. I've always been incredibly intentional about every decision I make in my life. Not every, that's not fair. Most decisions I make in my life.
This show being the exception.
I love bees, and so Climate Hive is a good thing. Pollinators are key. Beeswax is a good source. Honey helps my throat. And I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do to enjoy my career. And so I was not in a good mental place because my physical identity and my professional identity were sort of waffling. And it took me like a year to be like, I need to connect my love of the environment with my professional ambitions, and how do I do it, right? And now I've figured that out, or I hope I have, right? At least what is the pivotal moment, or what's the aha, right? Is I did a lot of discovery. I talked to hundreds of people in a very short period of time. I was meeting like 20 new people a week for 3 months, and continue to meet 20 new people or more a week today. And all around trying to affect change, right? And so the solution for me around happiness for myself, and what I think is going to be happiness for the beneficiaries of Investature Solution, is around trying to close the climate finance gap through retirement investment dollars, right? Because and that was my aha moment, where people for decades have been trying to solve resource allocation for climate solutions through capital markets, through federal or government money. All are good sources, but all are finite, right? Where the investment market, right? So think of like stocks, bonds, the money built on top of that, or like money market or banking investments. That's like $400 trillion.
Yeah.
Right? In the world. The climate finance gap, right? There's different estimates, but let's say the amount of money needed to be spent by the year 2030 to align with the Paris Accords is somewhere between $6 and $8 trillion a year. And then if we don't spend that, then it gets higher. Just like everything in climate, if you don't act fast enough, more resource allocation is needed to solve the problem. And the current spend is about $1.8 trillion a year. So we're at like 1/4 to 1/3 of closing the climate finance gap using traditional means, government money, private investment, banking money. in the world, let's say most people, right? I would say 75% or more and growing. But in the world of every age range, right? More and more people care about the climate crisis. It actually creates stress. It creates mortality issues, right? Like everything. Like everyone realizes it is a problem. It causes mental duress, right? So if you talk about what makes happiness, right? Your wellness or your health, the climate is making it not healthy. Right? Yet alone the physical risks or the inhalation risk for smog or other things, and sea rise for the global south, desert areas, forest fires, hurricanes, etc. All that's not helping happiness. And people that want to affect change and take action, right? They're doing things that they're being told matter, right? So, I have an electric vehicle. A lot of other people have an electric or hybrid. A lot of people are shifting their diet. A lot of people are wasting less. A lot of people are like, I'm still recycling because that's what I've been doing for 50 years. And all those are good things, but they're not enough, right? And one of the biggest things that is not in the education of society globally is money, right? But everyone knows, like, money moves the world. Right?
Yeah.
Money, and everyone knows for millennium that money moves the world. Everybody knows for millennium that money is your power. Everyone knows for millennium, like, your money is your vote and your voting is your power. But somehow around climate, people have forgotten that, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone has power, right, to actually help themselves be happier and help themselves be weller, is my poor grammar right there, by making intentional financial decisions, right? And that those financial decisions can do things like, at a macro level, help close the climate finance gap by reallocating $400 trillion. What's the gap? 6 trillion?
Yeah.
That's a small percentage, people. Right? And then second, as that money gets reallocated, maybe even greater than the climate finance gap.
Yeah.
Right? Then you're putting on less need around policy and consumption behaviors and other things, because you've actually alleviated the problem by helping yourself or the community of people around you that you could also educate on changing your banking, changing your investment. And so that was the aha moment for me, was that through all of I could meet the needs of people wanting to integrate sustainability in their life, educate them that choice should include financial decisions, right? And then that can help close the world's climate finance gap, make people mentally happier and mentally healthier and have greater financial wellness. And then our solution is targeted at employers who want their employees, right, to be well. They want their employees to be retained. They want to win the war for talent. The employers also want to achieve net zero goals because their stakeholders want them to, not just their employees, but their supply chain, their investors, everything.
Yeah.
And so the best direct correlation between financial decisions and employer power is retirement benefits, right? There's other things you can do, right, around other benefits that have give people money to improve their home, right? So like Scope Zero has a really cool solution to give people money to do home improvements as a benefit resource. But the ones that help close the climate finance gap is retirement plans. And so in the US market, which is where Investature is focused first, because it just happens to be the one that we're most familiar with, it's also the one that has the most money. So you can close the climate finance gap the fastest. And in the US, there's $12 trillion, or prior to Liberation Day, there was $12 trillion, now it's $10 trillion, in the defined contribution market, which is also known as like 401k plans, 403b plans, 457 plans for government employees. That's $12 trillion that can help close the climate finance gap alone, make employees happy, help employers. There's data that proves that actually when employees value their retirement benefits from their employer, they'll actually be more productive by about 20%. And the profitability of employers that have retirement benefits that are differentiated is 2 to 3% higher, right? Right now, employers are burning money on 401k plans and 403 plans where employees feel it's a commodity. And the employers are burning like $15 billion a year in the United States to provide the technology platform that people log into 5 minutes a year, and to provide investment advice and investment choices that people don't pay attention to.
That's true.
Right? So
I just-
that was my aha moment. That was my brief answer.
Yeah.
Aha.
I just want to say,
aha moment.
I want to say I'll turn over Mike for a question, but I mean, I think it's so interesting. One is I just commend you on thinking as big as you're thinking.
Yeah.
I think it's super inspiring, right? Like just I love the idea of just we have to think really big, but it's also super practical. It's big but practical.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think for Mike and I also, this idea of like you have a punch list around climate, like we both got solar, you're trying to go through, you're trying to do, like how can I make an impact as a person, right? But then, the finances piece of it, it's like, well, who do I bank with? And, Jonathan Foley, that's like his thing. It's like, this is one of the most important things you could do is the finance. But I think also that this moments where you wake up and you go, okay, I got this skill set now, through life, and but I keep on stressing out over climate, and it just feels like a waste of life if I'm not leaving something for behind or whatever. And
Yeah.
I think those that journey so many people go through, and then so many people don't know how to go through that journey to get to the point where you are, where it's like, okay, I'm gonna actually figure out how to like make an impact, right? It's like,
Do you have any idea what your 401k is invested in? Because I'm sitting here, you said that, I have no idea.
I don't.
I have no idea.
Mhm.
Right? And you're right, I do log in once a year.
Yep.
And then you just check. It's senseless. I mean, what you laid out so clearly was almost common sense, right? And I'm like,
Yeah.
That makes total, because it wasn't in my universe to think about it that way.
Mhm.
And now it is.
Right.
And it's like, well, what a great idea, right? So is your company on both sides of that? So you're going to the employers and you're creating this instrument where these retirement dollars can flow as part of the overall retirement investment program managed by whoever, right? And then are you doing the other side of that too, where you're allocating those dollars to businesses? You're putting the money to work, in other words?
Yeah.
So you're doing both sides?
So let me I'll talk in like a phrase called business architecture.
Okay.
Right. So the 401k market, it's called the defined contribution market, but I'm going to say 401k because most people just understand that better than 403b, et cetera. And the same kind of market exists in Australia, the Netherlands, United Kingdom, and Canada. But the amount of money in each of those is about 1/10 as the US, right? But those are similar nations where the same concept of your employer controls the investment options that you were given, let's say the 20 you're given, right, or the 12, and then the employee chooses, right? So similar markets, the reason we're going after the US is because it can have the most impact and we have the most familiarity, but it can be applied to other markets too. So now the business architecture piece. Think of like 3 players, right? There's the asset managers, right? So the mutual funds or ETFs, right? So BlackRock, Vanguard, or ones that are more climate aligned like Impacts, Natixis, Brown, right? But that's an asset manager, right? And anyone can invest in that in their 401k plan or in their private investments, right? The second player is investment advisors, right? So think of it like the financial advisors for individuals, but it's really the financial advisors for employers. And those employers can be universities, they can be nonprofits, they can be for-profits, right? But there's investment advisors, right, that have SEC registrations, they're called RIAs, and FINRA licenses to actually give advice to people,
Okay.
right? Where the end beneficiary is the consumer, right? The third is technology, right? So the asset managers, there's only so many in the world that are large. There's a lot that are small. Some are private. Investature is not an asset manager,
Okay.
right? We believe that takes a massive skill set to be a proper asset manager, and the companies that do it will do it well, right? We're a small startup. We are an investment advisor, right? But with a laser focus on what we call double bottom line criteria, right? So one line is financial returns, but with a long-term time horizon. Why? Because it's retirement plans, right? They have a long-term time horizon, right? And so our financial advice is like, what is the long-term history? And then as best as you can predict future returns, the likely projected returns in the long run for investments. And are they economical? Like, do they have a low expense ratio relative to their return? And then other fiduciary responsibility factors, but like financial profile on a long-term time horizon. And then the second factor, when we say double bottom line on the investment advice, is environmental impact measurable, right? Not as this fund called a sustainable fund, not as it called the social index fund,
gotcha.
right? Measurable climate impact, right? And so then we take an investment sleeve like bonds, right? Because people don't think about bonds enough. They don't think about fixed income enough, where it's actually half of the world's invested money, right? We say, hey, put all bonds, right, that are corporate bonds or green and blue bond funds, right? And we scatter plot them against those criteria, right? And we only recommend, like the Gartner Magic Quadrant, the top and to the right, needs to still have a good financial profile for long-term returns, right? But also quantifiable environmental impact, because that's what people want to be doing.
Yeah.
That's what will give them happiness. People think, hey, when I change my diet, I'm having a quantifiable return on the environment, and it's actually a quantifiable return on their own health, right? This is a financial version of that exact same concept that should make people happy, right?
Yeah.
And it's just to bring it forward and say, the data exists in the world to actually now see it that way, right? To see it where you can actually see the quantifiable environmental impact aligned to the financial benefits. The financial benefits have been available for hundreds of years, right? But the environmental impact, the data has only suddenly become good enough to actually trust it enough to make decisions on that double vertice. And so that's part of the why now, is that actually the data is good enough, right? And then the third part is technology, right? So what do employees log into to manage their 401k plan, but also actually intentionally look at how they're allocating the money, right? So there's this concept for retirements, which is set it and forget it. When the 401k plans were invented in the 80s and then basically came into prominence in the 90s, people were actually excited about it, right? And I was employed in the 90s, and I was excited about the fact that I didn't have a pension, right?
Yeah,
right. I'm sure you guys lived through that
remember when I
too,
was
right?
at corporate America, and they come in and they're like, all right, if you do this today, by the time you're gonna, yeah.
Right, and so in the 90s, when they first came into place, it was the main reason was because American society wants choice and freedom. A pension doesn't give you freedom of choice. A 401k does. And so at that time, people were they were setting it, meaning setting their payroll deduction to make sure they're saving for their retirement. Good. Tax deferred savings, good. Employer match, good. But the forget it part didn't exist yet, because people were so excited to actually have a choice. So there was set your payroll deduction and intentionally invest it, and you were looking. And even people with low financial literacy were excited to look. We've been taught for 30 years to not look. You just said, I don't even know what I'm invested in. 98% of people I've talked to in the last year do not know. Do not know.
Crazy, right?
Right, and yet it's $12 trillion in the United States alone, and 90% of people don't even know what it's invested in. Right, so I call that zombie money. Right, it's zombie money that actually, if people did the default investment, 25 to 30% of the money is actually invested in oil and gas, mining, and manufacturing. So people who want to be living sustainably are unconsciously destroying the environment. Right? Yeah. It's zombie money, right? And then you think about banking, it's the same thing. People are like, I'm just banking at the big bank because it's convenient and it's got a lot of branches, and that's what my dad did and my mom did. And banking is another industry, retail banking, where it's inertia driven. People like to stay with the same bank because you set up the bill pay, you got the statements, the app works, and people just coast blindly as zombies, not actually thinking about the power of that money, right? Not being intentional about it, right? And so the investment advice thing takes rigor. It's regulated for a reason. You need to know the actual wants and needs, right, of the individuals. So I can't just give off investment advice like that, right? Banking advice is simple, right? And so, we're all sustainability minded people. You just said in this interview, wow, I never even thought about that. And so what myself, but also the entire Investature team has been doing as we're growing in confidence that we have something that can help create happiness, right? Close the climate finance gap. Help people realize on their carbon footprint is actually their financial choices is probably their largest one. And so we haven't even talked about this yet.
Yeah,
right?
that's a great question, because that is one of the Project Drawdown. I mean, that's one of the pieces I think you wrote last year about where you bank. Actually, Climate Hive, we just opened up at Climate First Bank. So we just took our, that's where we bank. There's no money in there yet, but we're hoping,
Someday.
Yeah, we really hope so.
But do you know what let's say you had $50,000 in there.
Yeah.
And prior you had $50,000 in a traditional bank.
Yeah.
Do you know what the climate impact of that would be? Because that Project Drawdown also talks about that.
I don't off the top, but if you know it, yeah.
So for every $1,000 you move from a traditional bank, and a traditional bank is putting 25 to 33% of your deposits, it's lent out to one of the three most polluting sectors, right? Oil and gas, mining, and manufacturing. Every $1,000 that you move to a climate-friendly bank, and you have to make sure, do your due diligence, right? Is it divesting, or is it investing in solutions? The important thing as a consumer is to invest in, when you say it's climate-friendly, it's actual solutions, right? So like Atmos Bank invests in solar exclusively. It only lends to that. Walden Mutual, only food systems and sustainable agriculture. Beneficial State Bank, Climate First Bank, Amalgamated Bank, they're all similar. And the website, Bank Green, is a global website, not just a domestic website. Will actually tell you these are banks that are genuinely climate solution banks. Yeah. Right? So Climate First is one of those, but I'm saying it more broadly for other people who do not know that.
No, it's a great point, because actually I got the, what's the big website that has all the Climate First banks that you just mentioned?
Bank Green.
Bank Green. So that was in Foley's piece.
Yes.
And then from there I found, because it's really easy to get greenwashed. I mean, let's be honest. You think and I think most people, they want to do the right thing. Going back to your happiness thing, people think they're doing the right thing. It's like recycling almost, right? It's like, I tell people now, I'm like, you're better off composting if you're going to do something. Compost versus recycle. Like if you really want to save the environment, like methane gas, whatever. But yeah, people don't know. And then I think your point is, we talk a lot about like, how do you get behavior change? So why did I get solar? Is it because I want to save the environment, or because I don't really want to pay for energy anymore? It's mainly because I don't want to pay for energy anymore. And I'll get a battery because I would like to have my own little microgrid. Like, why not? And so it's how do we talk about these things in ways that encourage behavior change, and people think about it. They think about like, okay, where do I bank? And also I think trust, because that's another thing. Banking is such like a, you have your big banks, they're stable supposedly. Like, they have this thing, right? Yeah. And now I'm gonna put my money into this institution, they're climate, but like, are they stable? Like, is that, and I've had those discussions with, people I love who are like, I don't know about that. Like, that's risky. Yeah. So, but what do you think about, how do you address those questions of,
so one, I want to acknowledge a couple of people that helped me with this thinking, right? Because I didn't come up with all this out of the blue, right? So Project Drawdown, Jonathan Foley, return on investment of resource allocation. Nothing better I've read in my life. People should subscribe and listen to everything he says. He basically tells people in the world, this is what you need to do to solve the climate problem tomorrow with a smart resource allocation continuously. I shouldn't say he, the organization, but he's the spokesperson for the organization. Dan Chu runs the Sierra Club Foundation. He and a gentleman named Pedro on his team have changed the narrative around the climate finance gap to say shifting trillions. People need to talk in a magnitude of trillions. The climate finance gap is trillions. Most climate solution entrepreneurs talk in millions. And if they achieve their ambition, they affected 1 billion. The problem is trillions within a few years, right? Everyone in society needs to think and act at that magnitude, right? The impact I didn't get to, the finance emissions thing. Their Project Drawdown actually partnered with an organization called Topo Finance, run by Paul Moinster, and then the primary advisor is Patrick Flynn, who's the former chief of sustainability for Salesforce. The math on that $50,000 that we didn't get to is one less cross-country flight per annum per $1,000. Okay, So let's say you had a $50,000 business banking account for Climate Hive at Climate First that you chose to open there versus a traditional bank. You are saving 50 cross-country flights per year and getting better interest rate.
And that's real impact.
Right?
His impact, yeah.
Right. Like, and getting a better interest rate. It's not, it's a value creation decision.
Yeah.
It's not a green premium or
Right.
other things
Right.
that people talk
Right.
about,
Right,
right?
yeah.
You're
Right.
still getting both. You're
Yes.
getting the return and then you're having the impact. Because I've never thought about it in that way. I bank at Chase. There you go, right? Biggest bank in the country, I think.
It is, biggest bank in the world.
So,
Yes. I worked at Bank of America, the second biggest bank in the world.
you know, and that comment you made about zombie dollars really, I've been thinking about it, you know, since you said it, right? Exactly, right? And with your technology, when people are logging in, are they seeing quantifiable impact from their retirement dollar allocations? I mean, that's got to be very satisfying.
Yeah, so like the audience, you know, we think the audience for Investature solutions, and we have a couple, right? And employers who would buy our solution can buy pieces, right? You know, wherever they're at their right point in their journey. It's not like you have to buy the entire package, right? So we have a couple of different solutions. So we have the investment advice, the double bottom line for all investment sleeves. On the technology side, we have a finance emissions technology. So it's to actually help people understand who have net zero goals, either at an employer level or at a personal level, right? Because people talk about carbon footprint personally. We actually studied every single carbon footprint app, and none of them talk about finances. They all talk about behavioral choices, right? Not a single one integrates banking or investing, right? But so we can't solve the world's problems, right? But on the retirement side, through the employer, our technology enables individuals to see the current financial profile, like every other 401k platform, plus the carbon footprint profile of all of their investments. And then they actually can scenario plan. If I didn't forget it, if I said it and I intentionally invested it, or I revisited it, because you should always revisit, you know, like it's tax season, I'm gonna revisit things. It's health benefit re-enrollment season, I'm gonna revisit things. Revisit your retirement plan.
So as you're speaking to it, when people, you know, I work for X company, now I have Investature, now I can log in and see, and Mike's making the point that, like, you know, there's that dopamine, it's like, I'm doing something good. Like we were joking around that we look at our solar, right? We wanna see, like, what's the impact I'm making, you know? Like I like
look
to
at it more than I look at my 401k.
Right, exactly.
Because I don't perceive the 401k to, you know, be managed by me. I'm not influencing it, right? But I look at that thing from the solar on my roof.
Yeah.
You know, it's telling me I'm pulling down today.
Yeah.
But that's a question. That's a question, right? Like, I think most people, they have 401k and it's leave it to the experts, right? There's some person there and they have a good talk, and I just want to feel like I want to trust somebody to just take care of that for me.
Yeah.
So is there a shift with Investature where you're, okay, like, you know what, open this window, look at this thing, and it's not as complicated as you think.
Yeah.
Is that sort of?
Absolutely, and let me pull on the thread of like the dopamine or the happiness, right?
Yeah.
To pull the thread together of like looking at your solar, right? So on the personal banking, and then I'll get into investing. Two banks. So we bank with a company called Atmos Financial, and then my family and a lot of our employees do banking with Walden Mutual Bank. Both of those banks in their app have the counter that's saying this is every day there's a number that is moving for saying since you moved your money, right?
Wow.
Here's how many miles not driven, flights not taken you have done.
For you.
For me, right? And so now I've taken, and so what I want my business to succeed, but I just want more people who are sustainability minded, and especially people that have been doing this longer than me, to realize there's a new power that I'm providing to you. And I'm a businessman through and through, right? So I'm like trying to persuade people as a businessman, not as a nonprofit, right? Nonprofits are great at saying, here's the information, do what you'd like, right? Business people are persuasive, right? Because you can't sell a concept unless you're persuasive. So I am over the top persuasive because the climate needs it yesterday, right? But when I go to sustainability conferences, like I went to Green Biz in Phoenix, or the Higher Education Climate Leadership Summit in DC, or this conference, the San Francisco Climate Week that we're at, right? I actually take out my company's business banking account from Atmos and I show it to people, right? I'm like, this is the gratification that I am receiving right now. Don't you want this?
Yeah.
Right? And like I show them the counter. I don't show them my Walden Mutual because it's more private. But I'm like, hey, I'll just tell you, like, here's my business bank balance. By the way, it's not millions of dollars. Right? I would like it to be for any investors out there, but
I bet it will be.
Right.
If I had
and so I show them, and then I say, and so I'll tell one story. So I was at the Higher Education Leadership Summit in Washington D.C., and this is a consortium of university leaders that signed a commitment through an organization called Second Nature. So Second Nature basically asked a lot of forward-thinking universities 15 years ago to commit to being net zero 15 years ago, for whatever that meant 15 years ago, right? It means more today, right? And then what Investature is trying to do is actually have it mean even more, meaning include your finance emissions when you're not a bank, right? When you're a professional services company, when you're a university, when you're a high-tech company, include your finance emissions when you're not a bank and have that be part of your new net zero goal.
Yeah.
But 15 years ago, right, 150 universities signed a net zero pledge. And so then Catherine Hopkins and myself on our investor team were there at the invitation of George Dyer, who is another person who has inspired us and been a great partner in evolving our story. But one, introducing us to people, but two, the simple phrase that George runs an organization called the Intentional Endowment. And it's been focused for 10 years of trying to get university endowments to be more intentional in how they allocate.
Yeah.
But just that one word, intention.
Yeah.
And like I've reused it 1,000 times since I met George and understood it. Right, and because so many sustainability people around their finances are indifferent or intimidated or ignorant, not at their fault, right? Because they think they need the professionals to do it, right? Or society is not teaching them to think about it.
Yeah.
Right, but being intentional about it. And so at this conference, I was sitting at the table next to the head of sustainability for Morgan State University. It's one of the historically black colleges and universities in the US. The lady I was with, I'll keep her name private, but she's in her 70s, right? You know, she was 10 years after like Selma, right? But been like a civil rights leader for a long time. And I actually was asking her, I was like, one of our principles for Investature is we want to do double bottom line, meaning this financial benefits and planetary benefits. But we also believe in climate justice and environmental justice. And so part of our mission or our corporate values is with a climate justice, environmental justice lens. And so I was asking her, it's like, we say this, but we don't know how to do it. Like, guide me, like how should we do it, right? And we have a healthy conversation, she gives some good advice on that, and we're constantly evolving our environmental justice piece, right? To make sure that we're doing it fair, but also focused on solving the problem, right? And then it's like, hey, she's like, what do you do? And I tell her about Investature and tell her about 401k plans. I'm like, but here's the simplest way. Let me talk about your banking, right? Where do you bank? And she tells me she banks at and it's a national traditional bank. I was like, did you know every $1,000 is this, right? And she's like, how do I change this? And I show her the Bank Green app. And I was like, bring it up on your phone, right? She brings it up on her phone. I'm like, here's a couple of banks. You need to decide what's important to you. There's filters, right? Like what kind of services do you care about? Do you need a physical branch? Other things, right? And I was like, and if you don't care, like I'll tell you, I'll recommend, right? And then she's like so excited, right? She's like, I'm gonna do this tonight. And then the next day, I'm speaking about on a panel about like, did you know that your finance emissions is your largest carbon footprint, right, for the university leaders? And I finish the panel, and I see her, and she's like hovering behind, and she's shaking. And I was like, what's going on? She's like, I'm so mad at myself. I lost the webpage. Like, show me how to do it again because I couldn't do it. Right? And so then I sat with her again and we did it, and we actually even finished like opening up her bank account. Right? And so then she could move some money but like someone who'd been a sustainability minded, more on the social impact side, but so sustainability minded for 50 years, right? Suddenly, like, here's a new thing you have. Your money's your power. Money moves the world. Your money's your vote. No one taught you this yet.
Yeah.
And like she was shaking with enthusiasm, right? And then I hope, right, she's now telling her friends, telling her networks, right? And there'll be, you know, the ripple effect or whatever people talk about, right? That like, hey, because, and the number of sustainability minded people where Catherine, myself, Carla, Sam, like the, you know, the people, the dozen people that are on the investor team, as we meet with people, we have this concept of like, we walk the talk, right?
Yeah.
And we want other sustainability minded people to walk the talk, regardless if it helps us commercially.
Yeah.
Right? Just walk the talk, but like know that this is a way that you could walk, right? Double bottom line banking, double bottom line investing that you weren't thinking about before, right? And people will get excited about it, and then hopefully that'll have ripple effects, right?
I think it will. It's not inconvenient either, right?
Right.
Oftentimes change is inconvenient.
Yeah.
Because I have to change things that I don't want to.
Yeah.
But moving your banking from one, it stays banking.
Yes.
Right. It's banking, right?
Well, and here's the thing about like that comment, right? And is think about that. You change your bank once every 10 years, right? You look at your investments. Most people don't look at their investments, let's say 401k plans, ever, other than the day they start, right? Now to actually be intentional about those things takes a few hours once.
Yeah.
Changing your diet, looking at packaging, changing your energy sources. All of those things are like, I mean, think about the return on investment of just, if resource allocation is your time, the amount of time you can spend just changing your financial choices is brief. And the wealthier you are, the bigger the impact.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But at any wealth level, there's still an impact. And you made the choice like once, and you revisit it every couple of years. But like, be intentional, right?
Yeah.
And it's so less effort. Still shift your diet, change all the other stuff, but like, be aware of that and wake up, right? Like, it's so easy.
Yeah.
Right? And then the last thing I'll say is like, a lot of people say, oh, well, can you be successful in this political moment? Like the most frequently asked question when I talk to prospects, interviewers, investors is, yeah, but what about the political turmoil in the world, right, around populism, as I would call it more broadly, and in the United States. And I say it is a tailwind. It is not a headwind for what we do. It is a headwind, major headwind for some climate solutions, for sure. Especially ones that are like deep tech, that need government catalyst money to succeed, because government investment is meant for long-term things that aren't investable themselves, right, to catalyze it. So like direct air capture, direct ocean capture, I worry about that technology getting economical because it's still at a stage where it needs the government money and then just very willing private money, right? But most climate solutions don't need government money anymore, right?
Yeah.
Right? Most don't, right? They just need us to do them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and then if you think about banking and investing, it has nothing to do with the political environment. You just need to be aware of it and do it.
Right. And act on it.
And act on it.
Yeah.
Right. So why do I think it's a tailwind right now? Is that people who have been spending in America, people spend 5 hours a day looking at social media or TV. Right, zombie time.
Yeah, they've got time.
Right, there is time to spend a few hours to relook at your banking in one day. Like, turn off your social media and your TV for a day.
Yeah.
Be intentional about your banking and your investing. Maybe 2 days. And then like the impact you would have as a sustainability minded person of any age bracket is huge.
Yeah. That's so powerful. You know, it's not that complicated, is it? I mean, it's not that people solve much more complicated things throughout their day. They figure out how to use apps. They figure out how to use new technology, young, old, whoever. It's not that complicated to make this very impactful change.
Yeah.
But I would love to, if you could tell us, Scott, like also just a little bit about how are things going? Like, how are things going with Investature? It sounds like you guys are having some tremendous success early on. obviously you coming from the backgrounds that you do and really like leaning into it
Yeah.
is making a big impact on that. But what are some of the challenges that you're facing too? Like what's the picture look like for Investature?
Yeah, so let me say we could always do better.
Yeah.
Right. So like that'll be always like we could always do better. But in the context of the idea for Investor as a company was formed last spring, right? So about a year ago, through a program called Climate Base, right? Climate Base, for people who don't know about it, it does a lot of things. Like it's a job board, it's an event organization. But what I found most personally valuable is I would call it a talent incubator.
Yeah.
Right, and it's for people who just want to be smarter about climate for their talent-wise, and so then to their career can be either integrated better into their current job or shift their job function. But I would call it a talent incubator that is an amazing return on investment, right? So very affordable, 3 months of highly concentrated content and networking and opportunities. There's a similar one called Terra.do. Both are amazing. And I'm if you think about like Project Drawdown and return on investment, or I've been a business executive my whole career. Much better money spent and time spent than a master's or PhD degree in sustainability that will look great in your resume, but it's very expensive and takes a lot of time and is not as practical, right? Or do both. But if you want to turbocharge your, as a talent, as an employee, amazing program. And so that program also has a capstone concept where if like you have a business idea or a research project or something, they'll help you sort of run it through the funnel, right? And so in my cohort, which was in the spring of last year, I think there's about 150, 200 ideas that were capstones. I didn't even join Climate Base wanting to do this, right? I wanted to like find a great employer, right? That's really good at carbon accounting, but the carbon accounting with climate transition in mind, not just reporting. So much of the sustainability sector is just doing reporting, right? Versus transitioning.
Yeah.
Right. And you need reporting, but like we need the transition, right? Like that's what's needed to happen. That's the actual outcome. Right. And so I put my idea forward. Right. I started learning about the climate finance gap and my career in Fintech and consulting, and it won an award. Like it won what's called the Whale Tank, right? So I was like, oh, I've never been an entrepreneur before. I just ran an entrepreneurial idea through a ringer, right? And it won. That was my aha moment.
Yeah.
For the company.
Yeah.
Right. I was like, oh, okay. I was like assuming I'm just gonna go work for a really good climate company. Right, and it's right, and then and then I was like, oh, this was good enough that it won the award.
Yeah.
All right, let's make this real.
Yeah.
Right, and so then the company truly started as a company, like legally and also mentally, in the summer. Right.
That is amazing.
Right, and ever since then, nothing but. Right, so for me personally, I get job offers all the time. I just ignore them. Like, this is what I want to do,
Yeah.
right? And like talk about resource allocation. That's my resource allocation choice. I think this is a bet that will help make people happy, will help make employers happy, has a great return on investment, has a great return for the climate. And so I'm going to run its course, right? And so from traction, right? So our there's a lot of factors, right? So talent. We steadily are growing in talent at I'll call it the contributor level, the team level, as well as on our advisory board level, right? We have a world-class advisory board, and the volume and quality of our talent continues to grow, where I went from begging people in the climate-based cohort to like, help me shape this, right in the spring, to myself and the people on our leadership team. We get solicited dozens of times a week for like, can I work for you? Right? That's a good problem to have.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Right? It means we're doing something right.
Yeah.
Right? So that's good. Our advisory board is incredibly talented, and the level of engagement continues to just grow. And I've had a fairly successful career I could be a partner at a managed consultancy today if I wanted to be. I could be a managing director on Wall Street if I wanted to be. But I've still not had an amazing career. Like, people don't write books about me or anything like that.
And we're on our podcast.
I am on.
Yeah.
Sorry,
You know what I mean?
I've made it. But our board has had 1 or 2 degrees more success than I've ever had, right? And so we have a powerful board, but is also curated with like a diverse set of skills intentionally. So that's on the talent, like how are things going. On the customer side, right? Because the only thing that matters for any company to have impact is customers.
Right.
That's the only thing that matters, right? So we did massive customer discovery work all last year to shape our solutions, right? To shape the technology solutions, to have them on a path where they could be sold, and to have them on a path that would be beneficial as they're being sold. And we reached a point in general, like all right, we're ready to sell it. Like, we have enough, if you think of like a Harvey Ball or like percent complete, right? Like, our financial technology solution is complete enough that we can now sell it. We are climate tech, which is the finance emissions baseline and like how to draw down scenario planner for both individuals and like sustainability champions. Good. And our investment advice is baked well enough that we can put it in front of really like enterprise clients, right? Because our target go-to-market audience is larger employers for 2 reasons. They can move the most money to close the climate and finance gap faster.
Yeah.
Right? And the second is that they have the most stakeholders, right? So as they do net zero goals, right, or even more ambitious, the most people care. And so we're actually enabling them to help satisfy their stakeholders.
Yeah.
Right, where smaller businesses might all be like super climate aligned, right? Like 98% of the people at this San Francisco Climate Week conference are small businesses.
Right.
Yeah.
Super climate aligned, but they don't have that much money,
Right.
right? They don't have a lot of stakeholders, right? They're just doing the right thing,
Yeah.
right? And so we go after enterprise ones, for that reason. And so we now have customers. We have some signed customers. We have customers that we can reference, and we're constantly just trying to make more traction with that,
Yep.
right?
Yeah.
I would imagine a lot of those large companies also have those published ESG statements, right? So they publicly announce what their intentions are, so.
Yeah, part of our business case is 83% of the Fortune 500 has publicly declared net zero goals, which means it's a number and a date.
I was even reading the annual report from Denver International Airport.
Yeah.
And the DIA has 4,000 employees.
Oh, yeah.
It's a giant company out there, right? And they have very ambitious environmental reduction goals. Because I was thinking back in my mind,
Yeah.
airports, which, the city of Denver
Yeah.
owns DIA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge.
Good client for Investature.
For someone at Investature to reach out.
Yeah.
But I was thinking in the back of my mind, right? That's massive business, public statements.
Yeah.
They really mean it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What an interesting point your company's in.
Well, here's the thing where like the sustainability movement, right? So, like, we think one of the things we're doing is the next big thing. Or we think what we're doing is let me say that better. We think what we're doing is one of the next big things.
Yeah.
So if you think about like the evolution of the sustainability movement, specifically around environment and climate, right? Think of like in the context of like scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, right? So most forward-thinking climate groups, whether it's countries, companies, universities, whatever, just groups, have solved or have the plan that's public for scope 1 and scope 2, like what you control directly.
Yeah.
Right? The next evolution that the most forward-thinking ones have, right, is around scope 3, which is what you influence.
Yeah.
Right? When I talk and read about the vast majority of what people are doing on that next frontier, it's supply chain, right? And so what Investature is, and this word, I'm actually borrowing it, but amplifying it from Paul Moinster of Topo Finance, who works on helping companies' treasuries be more intentional, right? So like the balance of money that's not working capital for companies, but it's their treasury that's just sitting there. While it's sitting there, make it be more responsible.
Yeah.
Right, but as part of making that happen, he coined this phrase, financial supply chain, right? And so if you think of, so to have it fall in line with what most of the sustainability sector is thinking about is supply chain, but they're thinking of their upstream physical supply chain.
Yeah.
But your financial decisions is a supply chain decision, or it's a consumption decision, right? Like as a consumer, you're consuming the banking products of your bank.
That's right.
As a consumer, you're consuming the financial instruments of your investment company, right? And so it's part of the supply chain. It's just not, it's like a tangential, but it truly is. Your financial choices are a consumption choice. They're a supply chain choice for an employer. What technology, Investature or others that you use to provide financial wellness and retirement benefits to your employees is a supply chain choice.
Yeah. Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining us today, and super exciting. What a great conversation to have on Earth Day.
Thank you so much.
I think we both learned so much. For people that get this, and this content I think will be super valuable for many years to come, how can they help you? How can they help Investature reach its goals and be the vehicle that it needs to be for the climate and for finance?
Yeah, so thank you so much. One, thank you for the time, and it's the good coincidental that we're doing this on Earth Day, right? But it's a nice coincidence, right? And I think it's sort of cathartic to talk about it on Earth Day. So we want to always get better, right? So we feel we have a very good story to be compelling to employees and employers. Help us tell that story for yourself and for your employer. And where the story is not resonating, help us, right? Help us tell it better so that it does resonate and it does have an impact for employees' happiness, for employers' impact, and where those two things connect, right? One of the other areas that we know we're proactively seeking help on, and we have not solved it yet, is certain climate solutions struggle to be investable at scale. Right? And so if you think of the area that we're hyper-focused on, about not just getting more money invested in climate solutions, but also particular ones. Nature-based solutions, sustainable farming, or sustainable agriculture, as well as direct air, direct ocean capture, decarbonization solutions. They are hard to invest in, right? Because they're not publicly traded. Right, and especially nature-based, right, where it's a lot of small projects, and especially benefiting the global south. And like the people who are most affected by climate change are also the ones where the nature-based solutions could be co-located with them. Yeah. Right, and they're so intuitive, where they have the carbon sequestration, adaptation, and resilience are built in. Like think about watersheds, coral reefs, mangroves. Like it has everything you need. In one thing, and those are nature-based solutions, but they're hard to invest in. And so we're constantly seeking someone who can help structure an investable vehicle that's not a project finance vehicle. That's a security that can be bought and sold like a stock or a mutual fund, right? So whoever knows people who are creating that kind of vehicle that wants a lot of money invested in it, right? Because everyone who actually has an investment vehicle wants to be distributed, right? Would like to have the problem of being oversubscribed. We would love to help you be oversubscribed. We just need to identify those investments.
All right.
Thank you.
There we have it.